3. Unit 1, Day 3. Okay, so hopefully that was enough time to complete the warm-up. I see that we still have some people joining us at this point, so please do make sure that you make a mental note or you actually write it down somewhere in your notebook to give yourself a reminder that you need to go back and do the Unit 1, Day 3 warm-up. But I am correcting my attendance, Ayana, so I got you covered. But today's lesson is titled Nucleic Acids and Proteins. So at this point in the lesson, as we do every day, I'm going to ask that you all have your notebooks out and ready to go. Today is January 14th, 2021. We like to always include at least one objective and sometimes two. And then we also include an essential question because I believe that they give us a direction and they give us a goal that we seek to achieve by the end of this lesson, something that we can look back on and say, yes or no, did I answer that question? Do I know that information? So our objectives today, biologists will be able to compare and contrast the two primary types of nucleic acids, and biologists will be able to investigate the structure and function of proteins as it relates to the survival of living organisms. And then the essential question, what is the basic relationship between nucleic acids and proteins in cells? That is such an important question. So I'm going to leave this on the screen for some time to give you all an opportunity to write it down because we will continue to come back to that question throughout this course. What is the relationship between nucleic acids and proteins? The answer is pretty simple, and you're going to find out the answer today, but it's an important question. And we'll expound upon the answer throughout this course. So go ahead and copy down as much as you can here, whatever you feel will be useful to you as you continue to take notes in biology. And as you all are writing down your introductory information, I do want to mention that I looked at your virtual lockers, those of you who did them and who submitted them or saved them in your Google folder. And I really liked what I saw. I learned a lot about those of you. I saw some really nice pictures of your family members. And I left comments for those of you whose virtual locker I was able to see. I left the comments not only on the virtual locker, but also in the comments section on PowerSchool. So take a look at my comments, and I think it'll be cool as we continue to get to know each other. We've got some really, really interesting young people in the class, and I want you all to start to be able to share more about who you are and what's important to you as this semester goes on. Those of you who have not yet done that assignment, please do it. It's just an opportunity to be creative, to share a little bit about yourself and what makes you who you are, the people who are important to you. So I don't want it to be something that you look at as just another thing to do. You can, it takes 5 minutes to upload some pictures of things that you're interested in or that you dedicate some time to. I know we've got some different music fans in here. We've got a lot of people with some really cute dogs, some people who have some strong culinary skills, people who have taken some nice vacations with friends and family. So I learned a lot, and I look forward to learning even more. So I appreciate everybody sharing that with me. Okay. So yesterday we talked about two biological compounds, two macromolecules. Again, I want you all to get in the habit of sending messages to the chat when you show up a little bit late, just so I can make sure I have my attendance corrected. So if you know that you've shown up a little bit late today, please just send a message to the chat so that I can correct my attendance. Thank you. But yesterday we talked about two specific macromolecules, carbohydrates and lipids. And I told you guys that there were 4 things about each of these biological compounds that you need to know. And here they are right now. You need to know the monomer that makes up each each biological compound. You need to know the element that makes up each compound. You need to know that biological compound's function, so what it does. And you also need to be able to provide examples of the biological compound. Okay, so this chart is going to be really, really helpful. All of the notes that you took yesterday probably could be summarized into a simple chart like this. So if you did not take notes yesterday for whatever reason, this is probably going to be a good chart to get copied down. It provides a good bang for your buck. Okay, it doesn't take too long to write, but it's going to give you some really useful information that you will be tested on throughout this entire course. But right now, I want your help to fill out this chart. So these boxes, as we can see, are numbered. And we're going to go in order and reveal what's beneath these boxes. But I want you guys to give me some help. So someone, look at your notes from yesterday and tell me, what is the monomer that makes up a carbohydrate? What's the monomer of a carbohydrate?
Is it a monosaccharide?
That is perfect. Excellent, Kathy. So really the best answer is monosaccharide, but we have included glucose here because glucose is the most common monosaccharide. And it's the one that we'll talk most about in this class. There's also something else I want you all to notice. We've got 3 letters underlined here. The word glucose ends in the 3 letters OSE. Why have we underlined those letters?
It means sugar?
Good, yeah. So almost all sugars will end in the letters OSE. So when you see those 3 letters, your mind should automatically go to carbohydrates. And that tells you some other important information as well. All right, so I want you all to have these hints in your head just to give yourself some virtual cues, some easy things to remember. When you see OSE, you should be thinking sugar and you should be thinking carbohydrate. So excellent job, Kathy. Okay, the second box. What elements make up carbohydrates? And you all can feel free to use the chat too if you're being a little shy with your voice. You can use the chat if you want to contribute to this answer.
Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen.
Yes, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's excellent. But there's something that's kind of unique or special about carbohydrates and their elements. What's the ratio that these elements appear in? Because Kathy is right. Yes, excellent. Thank you, Jason. So we've got those correct elements, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But what's special about carbs is that they appear in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So again, those of you who weren't able to keep up with the notes yesterday or you weren't present yesterday, please do make sure that you have this information copied down. Okay, the third box. What is the function of carbohydrates? What do they do?
Provide quick energy.
Yeah, that's the primary function. That's the one we definitely want to remember. Carbs provide quick energy. And then we'll talk in the unit 2 about the fact that they also provide some structure for some specific plant cells or a specific part of plant cells. We'll talk about that in unit 2. But the one you definitely want to remember is the fact that carbs provide quick energy. I like to think of it like a sugar rush. When you eat a lot of sugar, you eat a lot of carbs, you feel it for that first 30 minutes or that first hour. You're feeling very jittery. You want to tap your fingers on something and you're bouncing your knee up and down. You might be talking quickly. Your thoughts are all over the place because your body has been flooded by those carbs and it's trying to burn off this energy quickly. Okay, so carbs give you that sugar rush. They provide quick energy. Okay, now Kathy has given us basically every answer with a small assist from Jason. But can I have somebody else, not named Kathy, even though Kathy's doing an amazing job, give me this fourth box? What are some examples of carbohydrates? What are some examples that we have of carbohydrates? Okay, so Jason, you're thinking of a really, really specific example, like a specific type of food. There are indeed a lot of carbs in spaghetti, so that's a good example. I'm thinking just more generally of like the chemical or scientific name of some of these carbs. For example, glucose is an example of a carbohydrate. Can you think of any others that we talked about yesterday? Starch is one. Excellent, Rudy. Thank you. Anybody else have another?
Can lactose be one?
Lactose is a good one. Thank you, Brian. I'm not sure if it's up on or under this box, but that's a good example. Any others? Cellulose, good. So again, we're seeing that OSE ending. Brian gave us lactose. Jason just gave us cellulose in the chat. They end in OSE. Neither of them is up here, but we've got a couple other words that do also end in OSE. Sucrose, fructose. Rudy gave us starch, and then glycogen is another example as well. So make sure you have that first row written out. Even if you took notes yesterday, having this table copied somewhere is going to be helpful to you. This is going to be an easy place you can return to and start memorizing things. Again, the power of visualization is strong. When you all are taking your tests, if you've written it down, you can literally start to scan your brain and say, I remember I wrote this down, and you can come up with this image of what your notes look like. Okay, so having things actually written down and having a visual representation of them, whether it be in a picture, in an image, a graph of some sort, a table, that's very, very useful. All right, let's move on to the next 4 boxes, which covered lipids, the other biological compound that we discussed yesterday. What's the monomer of a lipid? This one is a little bit tricky to describe, but what's the monomer of a lipid?
Fatty acids. Fatty acids.
Good. And there's one other piece. Starts with the G.
Glyc. I'm not pronouncing it.
Yeah, you're on the right track. It's glycerol. Glycerol and 3 fatty acids. So that's the monomer. Remember, it looks like the letter E, a capital E. We've got that backbone. That's glycerol. And then we've got 3 fatty acid tails coming out of it. What elements make up lipids? This should be a quick answer. What elements make up lipids?
Carbon, hydrogen.
Excellent. Thank you. I see, Brian, you took yourself off of mute too, so I'm going to assume you had that answer. But yeah, those are the 3 elements. The difference between carbs and lipids here is that in carbs, they appear in a 1:2:1 ratio. We do not have that ratio present in lipids. So we can see the ratio here, but we don't have it in lipids. That's an important distinction. That is something that you will be tested on. Okay, so make sure you know carbs have that very special 1:2:1 ratio between carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Box number 7. What's the function of lipids? What do lipids do for living organisms?
Storing energy.
They store energy. So they're a long-term source of energy. Good job. So whereas carbs provide quick energy that you want to burn right away, lipids store that energy to be used over a longer period of time. And they also make up the cellular membrane. Again, we'll talk about cell membranes and cell walls in Unit 2, but for now, you all definitely want to know carbs are quick energy, lipids are long-term energy. And then lastly, let's get some group participation here for the box number 8. What are the examples that we talked about? Examples of lipids.
Waxes.
Waxes are definitely a good example of lipids. I think that should be under the box. Anything else? What are some other examples of lipids? Phospholipids, that's a good word, yeah. Good job, Rudy. Can we think of anything else?
Oils.
Oils, yeah. Oils are a big one, too. Give me a second. Okay. Sorry, I see Fraylin just joined us. Thanks for joining. All right. Yeah, and then steroids. So we didn't have oils, but that's a good example to include as well. So I appreciate whoever that was who shared that just now. But again, at this point, we should have 2 rows of this table filled out. Carbs, lipids, and today we'll be able to fill out the nucleic acids row as well as the protein row. So I'm leaving this up for folks to take a screenshot, take a picture, finish writing, whatever you're doing to make sure you have this table. Please, please, please do it. Okay, about 10 more seconds, 10 more seconds. Okay, so based on the chart that you just copied down, the table you just copied, and then based on our conversations from yesterday, let's see if we can classify the following as being carbohydrate or lipid. Waxes, would that be a carb or a lipid?
Lipid.
Excellent. What about quick energy?
Carbohydrate.
Carb.
Carb, good. What about makes up cell structure?
Carb.
Good, Kathy, that's a carb. Glucose,
Carb.
good, carb. What about makes up the cell membrane?
Lipid.
Lipid. What is that an image of?
Lipid.
That's a lipid. We can see the glycerol backbone in blue, and we can see the 3 fatty acid tails in pink as well. Long-term energy.
Lipid.
Lipid. Glycogen.
Carb.
That's a carb. Good. That's an example of a carbohydrate. These 3 elements, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen.
Lipid.
And why do you say lipid there, Kathy?
Because I'm assuming for carb, it has the ratio next to it.
Good. Yeah. So they both, carb and lipid, both have those same 3 elements, but as Kathy said, in a carbohydrate, we should see the 1:2 to 1 ratio. Okay, what about glycerol and fatty acids?
Lipid.
That's a lipid. And lastly, this is obviously an image of a carbohydrate. So good job. You all definitely are on the right track and able to distinguish between these two. The two that we're going to discuss today are very different, but they are related in a very special way and in a very important way. But before we jump into it, I want you all to kind of think through this. Well, we've got an image here of people who are clearly from very different family backgrounds, from very different cultures, it seems, and maybe even from very different places. So I want you all to think about what gives us all of these differences. How do we arrive with so many differences? What makes us different? Anybody want to share out their thoughts?
I'm assuming that makes them all unique is that they're all humans.
Okay, yeah, that's a similarity. They're definitely all human, we would assume. But what's really like on a cellular level, what's different about these people?
Their way of dressing.
Okay, so we can see that they've got different fashion or culture, of course, is a big part of how we dress. People, even in Charlotte, the culture is different than it might be in New York or than it might be in LA. I know we've got somebody, I don't know, I can't remember if it was this class or my other class, someone's from Seattle and someone's from Atlanta. So even in the United States, there are people, different ways of dressing based on culture. And of course, that's the case when you're in different countries as well. But we're going to talk today about these things. They're called nucleic acids. And these nucleic acids are really what make us different. They're the reason why some of you have siblings who don't look like you or who act very differently than you. And they're also the reason why there are plenty of similarities between you and your parents, not only in the way that you look, but also in maybe some of the allergies that you have, some of the preferences you have for different foods, some of the small twitches you have, the way you pronounce words. So these nucleic acids are our third biological compound. We talked about carbs and lipids. We're introducing nucleic acids. These nucleic acids contain genetic information. They carry the genetic information of the cell. And they also control the cell's activity. So they're basically the boss of the cell. And in Unit 2, we're going to learn a lot more about what cells do and how they do it. But we can kind of imagine that a cell is like a really big mall. And in that mall, you've got a lot of different stores and a lot of different activities going on and a lot of different people who are controlling those activities. But these nucleic acids would be basically the owner and operator of that mall. They control everything. They say, okay, this store has to be open from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. This store opens from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. This food court can only serve this type of foods. We can receive packages between 5 p.m. and 2 a.m. These nucleic acids are going to control all of the operations of the cell. The monomer of a nucleic acid is called a nucleotide. We can see that word right here. So I want you all to, again, start coming up with these mental cues. When you see NUCLE as in nucleic acid, you should also be thinking NuCle as in nucleotide. Of course, those two words look very similar, so obviously they are related. Nucleotides are the monomer or the building block that make up nucleic acids. And these nucleotides contain three parts: a nitrogen base, a phosphate group, and a 5-carbon sugar, otherwise known as a pentose sugar. Pent means 5, and then ose, O-S-E, of course, tells us that it's a sugar, pentose. Sade, thank you for joining us again. If you know you joined 5 minutes late, folks, I really do want you to get in the habit of sending messages to the chat so that I can make sure that my attendance is correct. I don't want anybody to be marked absent when they were actually here. Thank you, no problem. And then lastly, remember, there are always those 4 things that I want you guys to know about each of our 4 biological compounds. You need to know the monomer, you need to know the atoms, you need to know the function, and then we're going to give you some examples as well. You need to know those 4 things. So here we've got those same 3 atoms, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but we're adding 2 more for nucleic acids. Nucleic acids also have nitrogen as well as phosphorus. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So these nucleic acids control the genetic information. That's the information of your genes, the information that makes you who you are. And this is why we say these nucleic acids make us as individuals unique. No 2 human beings are exactly alike. Even identical twins have some genetic differences. Very few, but some. All right. The 2 examples, and there are really only the 2 most general classes of examples of nucleic acids are RNA and DNA. We can see them at the bottom here, RNA and DNA. Now, there are some differences between RNA and DNA that we can see. Can you guys tell me what differences do you notice between RNA on the left and DNA, which is on the right? What differences can you see?
DNA has 2 strands and was it RNA?
Yeah, RNA.
It only has 1 strand.
Excellent. So, oh, sorry. So, Kathy, that's probably the most important difference. RNA is what we call single-stranded. It only has 1 strand. It looks like 1 single ribbon, 1 single spiral. DNA is double-stranded. It looks like 2 ribbons that are spiraled around one another. Okay. Another difference that you all should write down, and we'll talk much more about this later in the course, RNA has 1 nucleotide called uracil, whereas DNA does not have uracil. It has a nucleotide called thymine. Typically, we refer to their nucleotides with single letters. So cytosine is C, guanine is G, adenine is A, and both RNA and DNA have those same 3. They both have C, G, and A, but RNA has U and DNA has T. We'll talk a lot more about that, but these are the 2 examples of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So again, the Na stands for nucleic acid. DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. Again, the Na stands for nucleic acid. All living things need to be able to carry their genetic information with DNA and RNA. So you will see DNA present in all living things. Doesn't matter if it's a human being or a sloth or an ant or a sea urchin or a piece of coral or a bacteria. You will see DNA present and RNA present in all life forms. This is absolutely essential. Okay, so here it is. Here's that same information written slightly differently. DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is double-stranded, so it has the shape of a double helix, and it has the bases ATCG. RNA has the bases AUCG. So I've always thought that the monomer, the picture of a nucleotide, looks like a house with a satellite sticking out of it. That's the phosphate group. The house is the pentose sugar, and with a flag as well. The nitrogen base is the flag. Okay. We'll talk more about this. So I honestly don't even think you need to write this down, but we can find DNA in different forms at different times. We'll talk much more about that. So I'm going to skip through it. And I'll ask that you all be able to compare and contrast a little bit later. But here's the important stuff, and we're about to talk about proteins. DNA, this is an extremely important sentence. Please, please, please make sure that you write this down. DNA provides the instructions to make proteins. DNA provides the instructions to make proteins. So that's the relationship. This is the answer to our essential question today. The relationship between nucleic acids and proteins is that DNA is the instruction manual that allows the cell to construct or synthesize or make proteins. So we start off with DNA and we eventually can get to a protein. The DNA is the general instruction manual. It tells the cell what it needs to do and what it needs to use in order to make a protein.
Do we write what's in the box too?
You don't have to. They're basically saying the same thing. The only thing I think that's helpful here is this phrase genetic information. So the instructions are really called genetic information. Good question. Okay. So what is a protein? We just talked about the fact that DNA is the instruction manual to make proteins. But what are proteins? So proteins are a general class of substances that do a lot of different things. In fact, most of what makes you who you are proteins. Your hair is made of a special protein called keratin that we can also find in our fingernails and in our toenails. What else? We'll talk today about insulin, which is a protein that helps your body to break down sugars. Many different types of hormones are made of proteins. Many parts of the cell itself are made of proteins. So proteins have a lot of diverse functions. The monomer that makes up a protein, remember monomers are like our building blocks. Mono means one. Polymers mean chains of many. So the monomer that makes up the polymer in this case is an amino acid. And then the atoms that make up a protein are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen yet again. So we've got those same three atoms in all four of our biological compounds. But here we also add nitrogen. We also add nitrogen here. And then it's important to say, we mentioned yesterday that one of the central themes of biology is that structure determines function. The shape of something ultimately decide what that thing is able to do. In the case of proteins, the way that the protein folds, and this is, you could get into a really complicated conversation about this, but the way that the protein folds within itself, as you can see in this image in the bottom right, is going to determine what that function is able to do. Some proteins are like tunnels that allow things to go through them. Some proteins break things down and other proteins build things up. So proteins do a lot of different things for our bodies and for the cells of living things, but ultimately their function is going to be determined by their structure, how they're shaped, how they're folded. Okay. So again, we've got that same sentence. We're going to keep coming back to it because it is so important. DNA holds the information to build proteins. In this case, it's the order of those nucleotides that determines the order of the amino acids. So we talked about those four nucleotides in DNA, A, T, C, G. Just imagine I had 100 of those, A, T, T, C, 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 G, A, T, C, A, T, all the way through 100 of those. And then I just flipped them, I reversed them. By changing the order, now I've also changed the order of amino acids. And amino acids, again, are the monomer of proteins. Now, that's something we'll talk a lot more about in later units. But I want you guys to recognize now that the order of the nitrogen bases determines the order of the amino acids. So there's a close relationship between DNA and proteins. All right. Now, you all, part of your asynchronous assignment today is to investigate these 5 specific types of proteins. So I won't say too much about them, but these are 5 really common and very important examples of proteins. So go ahead and copy these down as your examples. We've got enzymes. I don't need you to write down exactly what they do right now because, as I said, you all will be investigating their function as a part of your asynchronous assignment. But enzymes, hormones, hemoglobin, insulin, and antibodies. Okay. No. All right, I want you guys to be able to jump right into your asynchronous assignment. So we won't play that Kahoot right now. We can come back and do it a little bit later. You've got an exit ticket and you've got 2 assignments. I think the protein research assignment will take a little bit longer. The macromolecule matching should be pretty simple. It's only about, I think it's 6 questions and 5 of them are multiple choice. So you might want to start with that just to get some momentum. But we do have about 22 minutes left, and I think that should be enough time to get at least one, but probably both of these assignments done, and then your exit ticket as well. All right, so I will leave you all to it. I will be here on mute. If you need anything, you can type a message to the chat if you want me to go back to a certain slide that you maybe didn't get.
For the protein research, do we put it in a Google Docs?
No, you'll type directly into the assignment on Canvas. Good question. When you open it up, it'll make sense though.
Where it says like take a quiz? Is it that?
Yeah, when you're on Canvas, if you scroll into our modules, you should see an assignment that looks just like this. I'll show you. So, oops. Something happened. 1 second. So if you're in Canvas, and I'm waiting for my screen to share, for some reason it stopped sharing. If you're in Canvas, you should be in our Unit 1 module. You'll scroll down and you can see Unit 1, Day 3. Here are the assignments right here. I'll click on protein research, and then I'll click on, you guys will be able to, for you, it'll just look like take a quiz, but it'll take you to what looks like this, and you'll be able to answer the questions. Do student view. So yes, here's student view. I've also, yeah, it says take the quiz in the bottom left. I've provided some links there as well that you can use to get some verified information about these 5 proteins. Not sure why that keeps happening. Keeps unsharing my slide.
Tell them.
Okay, folks, so it's now 11:36, so you all should go ahead and enjoy your lunch break. If you need any additional help with your assignments, please don't hesitate to reach out. I don't want you all falling behind. So if you know that you've got a couple missing assignments, do them right away so that you don't have to worry too much about them as time goes on. I'll talk to you tomorrow. We only have one more day this week. That's a reason to be excited. So enjoy your Thursday, and I will talk to you tomorrow.